sense at all, and that is the nation's song, and there's a pride to it. Yeah, things have become the farce of reality has sort of hijacked any capacity for satire, because satire gets absorbed very quickly. It's very hard to do it effectively where it will have any impact. I mean, if you think about your movie, Wag the Dog, which I think still obviously will hold up, but like everything's moving so much quicker. How do you satirize, what's going on? Because he's his own buffoon. I mean, it's a very strange thing that the president is a clown, to most of us. But it's like it's hard to do anything funny about him because you don't want to trivialize the horror show that's happening.
Yes, and you can't actually do something funny about him because he's already that crazy. So you can't. There's no way to go with a parody because that's him.
Yeah,
we watch it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I find myself watching older comedies just to enjoy. Back in the day when there was timing. And there was jokes and stuff and I'm not really that guy, but lately I'll watch the old comics on Johnny on YouTube. I'll watch Rickles, Buddy Hackett, Dangerfield. I'll just to hear that timing, just to see that work.
But there was a real craft.
Oh, of course,
there was a craft, and now we're in something. I don't even know how. It'll take maybe another 50 years if somebody could define this era that we're in.
And I find that so helpful when people say, history will show. And I'm like, that's optimistic that there's going to be history, number one. And number two, whoever's writing it is going to be of a sound mind.
Yeah, no, look, I thought that the comment in David's piece in Stars and Stripe is about that the longest a democracy has lasted is 250 years, and we're now up to 250 years. Yeah. I mean, it's a frightening thought that's as long as a democracy has ever lasted, and we're right up there at that point, and we are facing this kind of collision of madness that we can't even get out of our own way. And it's not just Trump alone. And I think that's where the documentary is so good, because it's not chasing just him. It's just that we are so dysfunctional in general that we cannot actually work as a democracy at this point in time.
Right. Yeah. And that it's just amazing how how many sort of craven fucking small time grifters are having their day
in one place.
Right. And the idea of capitalism, when I think that the focus seems to be in the doc that that there is a way for capitalism to function for everyone, if it's done responsibly. But my problem with a lot of that free market thinking is, for some reason, no one factors in the greed element and the complete moral bankruptcy of people who want money and power. But, I don't know, maybe it'll level off.
You would hope, but I don't know, because the bottom line is sort of down. Everything is about the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that changes. I mean, in terms of, look, there is no crazier decision made by, say, with Citizens United. As a concept, you say, hey, why don't we just have this, and then people can spend as much money as they want to donate to a candidate, just as much as you want. So if you want to donate $100 million for a candidate, that's fine. And you go, no. Doesn't that sort of mess with the concept of the people? Otherwise, the 100 million is there a very few people can donate that, and therefore they're going to get something special. They're going to get something that you're not going to get because they're spending more money than you.
They own the guy.
And they own the guy. And somehow that became like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And this comes from the Supreme Court. That's how you came up with something that idiotic? It boggles my mind. I'm not some kind of, somebody that understands all of this kind of the legalities of things or whatever. But on the basic level, it makes no sense that you can spend as much money as you want.
Well, I think everybody's in their own bubble in terms of their decision making, including the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But let's get back to simpler times, Barry.
Oh, yes.
When I was a doorman at the Comedy Store, I was on a lot of drugs at the time, but it was in the late 80s. And, I used to just fester and look at all the names on the wall. And I always saw your name on the wall. And I'm like, what did he do here? Was he here? Because I got I was in deep at the Comedy Store. I believed in it. I believed in the idea of it. I thought that it was a magical place in a very dark way. And I really kind of focused on all the names on the walls, wondering, how do they fit in? So how do you fit in over there?
Well, here's the short version of that. When I was doing writing for, say, the Carol Burnett show and other shows, I used to have a partner, Rudy DeLuca. And Rudy DeLuca had written for Sammy Shore. He'd write jokes for him. And one day, Sammy Shore came to Rudy and said, Frank Sennis has the old Ciro's, which had been closed at that point, and said, there's the small room. And he said, he'll turn it over to me. This was Sammy Shore talking. And have a little nightclub. And Sammy said, Rudy said to Sammy, but nightclubs are dead. Sammy, nightclubs are dead. It's over or whatever. He said, yeah, but he'll give me the place and the little venue and I can blah, 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 whatever. And Rudy said to him, well, why don't you do it like the Improv in New York? Just have that kind of place. And that's became the Comedy Store. And
so you were brought in before Mitzi even.
Oh, yeah. But, Sammy was married to Mitzi.
Right.
But she wasn't involved initially.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of the Comedy Store. And it used to be, in the very beginning, you could just show up and, nobody's on stage, and then you can go on stage and this person, or sometimes, and then what happened is like Richard Pryor would wander in and he would get up and he would do something, and some of the more named, guys, and then some people off the street literally just went up, etc. And then it got more formalized as it went along. And then what happened is in the divorce between Sammy and Mitzi, Sammy gave it up because he didn't have that managerial quality that Mitzi had. And she was much better at structuring it and everything else. And then she ultimately took over and really ran it.
But were you doing stand-up?
I started when, this sounds crazy. I was in an acting group, and which I didn't want to be an actor, but I was there anyhow. I was literally there just hanging around and just absorbing it.
Which one?
It was a guy named Jack Donner, and it was on the Oxford Street, right off of Santa Monica and Western. There was a little theater upstairs. And so I did that. I didn't really want to... when I came out to LA, I didn't know what to do with myself. I ended up at the beach.
You were from Baltimore.
From Baltimore.
Let's go back there for a minute. So, but you knew you wanted to be in show business. Had you done some work? What was the situation in Baltimore other than what we know from Avalon and Tin Men and No,
I didn't want to be in. I had no idea about show business. I didn't even have a clue. I had never even thought about the idea of writing or directing or anything.
How old were you when you came out here?
I was around 22.
So what were you doing in Baltimore before?
I was in Washington, and I was working at a television station.
Well, that's show business.
Well, and if you think about it now. But here's what happened. I was at American University, and I only took courses that would interest me. And there was a course on television. I figured, well, and here's my motivation. That sounds easy. Won't be a hard thing. Not a lot of studying. It's television. And so I ended up doing that. And there was a professor who ran this class. And I did this little show thing as an exercise. And he took a liking to me, and he got me a job at WTOP, which is Channel 9 in Washington, D.C., in a training program. You get $50 a week, and then you do everything. You run the teleprompter, You make slides for the news show. I worked the hand puppets on the Ranger House show and Oswald Robert, Dr. Fox, and I did all those things. And that's what I started doing. And I started, one of her jobs is to roll the commercial breaks into the late show and the late, late show. You remember they used to have
So you were the sucker that you were the only one in the studio. Let the kid do it. Yeah.
So you're there until like 2:30 in the morning, you know, and the screw ups that went on, et cetera, in that particular period of time. And, but I'm going to sidetrack, but here's like a thing that was amazing to me is that I always wondered about the audience out there because you don't see an audience, you just do it. And you go, is anybody actually watching?
Right.
And I only say this because one night they the Late Show, and it was called it was Glenn Ford and the Man from the Alamo. It started, and the thing is going on, and the first commercial break that comes up, it would say like a guy goes out the door, door slams, go to the commercial break, right?
Yeah.
And it was that, and all of a sudden the leader came up. So something is out of whack.
Right.
So instead of saying, why is the cue wrong? Now at 5 minutes to 12, we go back to the movie.
Yeah.
And it goes, the end. Now it started at 11:30. At 5 minutes to 12, it says the end.
Yeah.
And so we realized we got the last reel up first rather than the first reel.
Right.
So you go to the announce booth, and the announcer says, and now for the beginning of The Man from the Alamo. And then the movie starts, right? Not one phone call to say, what the hell is going on here? You show the end of the movie first and then the beginning. Nobody called. No one. Uh-huh. And you go, are people actually watching? Is there an audience, or do they just not care? It doesn't make any difference if it's out of the story is
at
backward.
That hour. Maybe it's just like for me that resonates because I still like coming upon things that are already on. Like, because now you can start anything, anytime. There's no channels. Yeah. But I used to like turning on the TV and being in the middle of something because for some reason it made me feel like, well, there's got to be someone else alive who's showing this movie. So maybe that comforted people. Like, you know, the one other guy that's up fucked up. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, when you say that, Mark, when we were kids and we went to the movie theaters, we didn't know when the show began. You know, we'd be 8 years old. You'd go to the movies. Sure. Saturday. And you just walked in and you sat down. So you never saw a movie from the beginning. Yeah. And then there'd be, you know, cartoons and things. And then it'd come back to the movie. And then there would be that point where we would turn to one another. Is this where we came in? Is this where we came in? And they go, oh, yeah. But wait for it. Let's see the fight scene again, you know? Right, and then you would leave. And so we never saw things from beginning to end as kids because we never knew when a show began. You know, we went to the movie theater. It wasn't like, oh, at 9, you know, at this time.
Your parents just wanted to know where you were for a couple hours. Yeah. They'll be in there. And we could go do some stuff. So you had some experience, at least with hand puppets and hand
puppets and all of that, and then and working on the news shows
and watching movies. Anyways, you got to sit there and watch movies.
I saw 2 movies a night for almost a year, and that, in a sense, without thinking about ever getting into the business, I just started watching films I had never heard of. Like I saw Citizen Kane. I never heard of Citizen Kane. Yeah. And so I'd see some of these movies and I'd see Preston Sturges films and everything else, things I had never heard about, no one talked about. And that began to get into my head without me consciously thinking about it. So when I came out to LA, I ended up at the down at the beach in Hermosa Beach, Hermosa Beach down there. And I was starting to hang around with this guy named George. And George and I would hang around. At one point, he didn't have money. I didn't have any money. And a lot of people, we were just, you just get by.
What year is this? Like 1970?
This was about 1968.
Wow. So it was crazy here.
Yeah, it was totally nuts. I mean, it was like it was like a total crazy period and great fun.
Just like hippies and drugs and weed and, people.
Everything was going on, and the music was changing, and it was all things were going on, and everything was sort of very loose. Like, for instance, now you hear about Laurel Canyon and the things, but we would literally go over there and come up into the area, and we would go up, and you just walk along the streets and you hear some